Okay, good evening. It's not Monday, it's Wednesday, September 3rd. And this is the Education Committee meeting. With me here are all members of the Education Committee, Mr. Warschauer, Dr. Thomas, and Mr. Held, and then fellow board members, Mr. Sirota and Ms. Evans. And possibly others are showing up later. We have a couple of items on our agenda today. We have a presentation that consists mostly of updates on items that the board has approved earlier or last year, and we get an update of how we're faring in that area. And then a number of reports, in particular with about the English language arts pilot and the elementary progress reports and 2 student activities. This is the beginning of the new school year, 25-26. From what we're hearing, things are off to a great start. And I want to thank all the staff and administration and everybody involved in getting this year, preparing for this year and getting everything ready for what I'm very excited to think that this is going to be a super exciting year with lots of growth for everybody involved. And on that note, I think we can move on to item number 3, the announcements. Mrs. Brennan.
There are no announcements this evening.
Great, thank you. That gets us done. 2 minutes. Members of the committee, I'm going to ask if you have had a chance to look at the minutes and if we can approve, recommend that the minutes be moved to the legislative committee. I see thumbs up for approval, so the minutes are approved. Thank you. And that gets us then to the presentation. Ms. Brennan is going to start off with the education updates.
We have a few education updates planned for this evening, give you an update on things that were in progress from last year, and as well as looking ahead to some things we'll be working on for the upcoming year. So the first item is a resource implementation update so that you can have an understanding of what progress has been made. Last year, we worked hard for a full implementation of illustrative mathematics. Students are using illustrative mathematics in grades K through algebra, and we've been working with our elementary, middle, and high school teachers to implement that program with fidelity along with student-centered classroom principles. In order to monitor the implementation, the administrative team, along with the coaches and representatives from the University of Delaware, did a number of walkthroughs last year that gave us feedback and enabled us to prioritize different topics for professional development. It definitely helped to support teachers, allowed us to give feedback, and also craft a professional development implementation plan that met the needs of the people with whom we were working. A lot of times when you implement a new program, one of the biggest concerns is of an implementation dip, and you would typically see that in your summative assessments. As far as the PSS scores went for the elementary K through 5. Throughout the district, we saw increases. The only exception to that was in grade 3. And so as we're working through different topics and priorities for this year, we will be going back into grade 3 and looking at curricular alignment, the practices at that grade level, and trying to figure out why those scores decreased a bit when we saw some small as well as some larger increases in other grade levels. So we were pretty excited to see that overall we had increases in mathematics and our PSSA scores. This year we continue to work with the University of Delaware. The focus areas will shift from the implementation and the training of our teachers to now working with our special education staff to support our special education students in that very rigorous environment, as well as supporting our administrators to be good supervisors of mathematics instruction in the classroom. The other program that we're working with is a full implementation this year of FOSS Science. This was piloted last year at the elementary level. It is aligned with the STEEL standards. Students who participated in the pilot last year were very excited about learning science. We had a really positive experience with the FOSS materials, and we kicked off this year with professional development for all of our K-5 teachers. That was received really well. It had a really positive impact. And as we work through the different units in the upcoming year, there will be unit planning that is supported so that teachers are comfortable not only with the concepts being taught, but also that shift to making the students the scientists in the room and having them fully engage with content. We will be monitoring this implementation similarly to what we did with math, with walkthroughs, so that the administrators can help support set PD goals for teachers and also become more knowledgeable on science instruction and the advance of the STEEL standards. The other implementation we have going on, we're very busy, K-5, is the iReady intervention assessment tool. Our teachers participated in a Getting Started with iReady training on their first few days back in August. We are building level implementation teams so that we'll use a train the trainer model. So we'll have a small cadre of people from each grade level in each building that will become the experts on iReady. They'll then use collaboration time and some professional development time to turn that training around to their teams and colleagues, and they'll be able to support people as we move through the process. The benchmark is the big part coming up for us mid to end of September and early October. Once those benchmarks, which we will use as universal screeners, are given to students, we'll be able to then set priorities for intervention for students. The other nice thing about the iReady product is it comes with a built-in intervention and extension tool, and that's what makes this product so desirable, is it will not only help students to practice and address some of the gaps in their knowledge, but if they're knowledgeable on certain topics, it's strengths-based, so it will continue to build out their abilities and their understanding of different things all the way through 12th grade, honestly. So that's a really great thing for all of our learners. The priority will be to use that part of the tool during win time, which is what I need. And teachers will also be able to use that tool during centers. It has a teacher component to it as well, where they can use lessons from the pathway for one-on-one or small group instruction. So parents will be receiving additional information about iReady in their building level newsletters, and also from their students' teachers. We're very excited to have that product. So looking forward to the upcoming year and what our priorities are, we continue to look for ways to enhance our programming and the knowledge of our teachers so that we can inspire learners and empower their futures. And we do have a number of measurable goals that we will try and accomplish by the end of the 3 years of the comprehensive plan. You've seen these in prior presentations. The one part that you haven't seen is some information on how we set our professional development goals. And ultimately, within the comprehensive plan, we have 3 professional development goals. These goals were set because when you look at the other measurable goals that we're trying to achieve, these are the 3 professional development areas that seem to best support reaching those goals of implementation. So the first one is responsive instruction. This fits nicely with both our values as well as kind of our pathway through the rest of the comprehensive plan. Within our PAETEP application, that's the application we use for doing our ratings and evaluations of teachers. There's a professional development tool, and as people go in, as administrators go in and they complete formal observations, each one of the different domains is ranked and scored. And so you can go in and pull a report district-wide that tells you what the strengths and the weaknesses are, and as a district as a whole, what are we scoring out of those different domains. So you'll see here that these goals were set for incremental improvement over the course of the 3 years of the comprehensive plan, with the baseline data being set from the 23-24 school year. So what we did was we went into the tool, we looked at how our teachers were doing at the end of 23-24, and then last fall we built out these goals for improvement based on that. So we are gathering a number of different data points related to professional development, this being one, but also having teachers provide information to us on how they see themselves, what they rate themselves reflectively in each one of these areas. So we will be focusing on building out skills and strategies in the area of responsive instruction. The second one is the goal area of coherent instruction. So this is the planning and design of lessons. And the last one is the area of engagement. And we just recently at the secondary level did an extensive presentation on rigor, relevance, relationships, and engagement, and how important the different aspects of engagement, whether it be cognitive, emotional, what have you, how important that is to long-term learning for students. And so our focus area this year is specifically on engagement. We will also be supporting those other areas in terms of our professional development plan this year. And by the end of the 3 years, we hope to be able to meet these goals as they are set. It's a little look at what's going on in curriculum and instruction, teaching and learning, and professional development right now and for this year.
Thank you, Mrs. Drennan, and again, the team behind her, because this is a group effort, I would say. Members of the committee, do you have any questions, comments? Mr. Held?
So first, thank you for the presentation. And I think, Mrs. Drennan, you mentioned there's a lot of new initiatives. And so thank you for all of these. There's a lot going on. And I know these things take time to sort of take root and to flourish. And so really exciting stuff already. I did want to ask about the professional development goals, just because this is an area I'm not all that familiar with. And so I know you have a baseline for these and then sort of increases year over year. Could you help just shed a little light on, so what is the so what's the scale? So if we go from like a 2.3 to a 2.7 over a number of years, what does that sort of mean in reality? What sort of improvements would we realize? Just not being in the classroom, I don't have a real sense of what that looks like.
So the scale is written for evaluation purposes with a 3.0 being distinguished, and then the middle of the 2.0 scale being proficient. And then anything below the 2.0 would be needs improvement, and then below a 1 would be failing. So we're moving teachers on that rubric towards being distinguished in those categories. And in all of these cases, it's not that our teachers are distinguished or proficient, it's that that element in the lesson that's been observed meets the standard and the criteria for being acknowledged as distinguished rather than proficient. We're largely proficient when you look at people's evaluations in terms of the different domains and aspects of lessons. But in this regard, we're really talking about the planning for responsive instruction and what student engagement looks like rather than what a teacher is or isn't in terms of their final evaluation.
That's really helpful, thank you. And so is this sort of a 3-year plan? At the end of year 3, do we reevaluate, and do we keep moving the goalposts until we get to a 3.0, or?
Yeah, the fun thing about this is comprehensive planning starts again. So at the end of the 3 years, we hope to be here, and that will be the starting point for the next comprehensive plan and those conversations. Anything that doesn't fully get achieved in 3 years certainly can be carried through if we think it's still necessary to carry it through into the next plan.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Warschauer?
I appreciate the PD goals as well. I don't know that this is a question as much as it is a comment. I think having, as somebody familiar with the Danielson framework, I think having focus areas makes a lot of sense. I guess it's a curiosity / an encouragement about how these PD goals will influence teacher goal setting at the beginning of the year. Actually, let me ask that as a question. Have you thought about how this intersects with teacher goal setting?
So we've talked about SPMs and how they need to be crafted so based on student achievement, but talking about the power of shifting your instructional practice to then move student achievement forward. So that has inherently been part of the conversation.
And can you clarify SPN for the non-ed people?
Student performance measures, it's required by the state of Pennsylvania in terms of part of the teacher evaluation overall for the year. Every teacher who is an instructor in a classroom sets a goal based on their students for them to achieve, and then that data is collected and they're rated on their success in meeting that measure.
Any other questions? All right. I have two, I think. First of all, the K through 5, yes, there's a lot going on. So one of my questions is how much is, what is happening at the secondary level so that students are seeing continuation of this? Is any of the work that for your future, for your goals for this year, looking at that?
So for example, FOSS is being done now in elementary because it had already been addressed through the science revisions at middle and high school. So prior to last year, when we recommended curriculum renewal where it was a K-12 renewal of an area, elementary and secondary renewed at different times, and so that was the case. IM was already being used in secondary for algebra, for example, so then it was bringing elementary into line with that. So we futuristically will look at programming K through 12 so that vertical articulation can be taken care of all at once, but prior to last year, secondary and elementary didn't always renew at the same time.
That makes sense. And then back to the PSSA district-wide increases for the elementary school, with maybe the exception of the 1 grade. That seems a really impressive success, given that this was year 1 of the illustrative, at least in the elementary school. So kudos there to everybody on getting there. And I was curious how you feel that the role of the coaches contributed to that success.
I think the coaches were very helpful. So not only did they support instruction in the classrooms and help teachers both plan and deliver illustrative math lessons, prior to each unit beginning, the coaches, University of Delaware, Mr. Mishner, Mrs. Pouste, worked with classroom teachers, representatives from every grade level, to do what we called an unpacking of that unit. So they would preview the unit with them. They would help to plan the instruction and the student activities related to that math unit, and the coaches were instrumental in that process.
So that model with the coaches is continuing moving forward. Right.
Moving into science.
Yes, moving into science. Other questions, comments? All right, then let's move on to item 6, the Education Committee reports and recommendations. And the first one is student activities. There are 2, I believe. One was the girls' cross-country invitational in Carlisle, and then the Thespian Conference in Allentown in January. Are there any comments, questions? Are we okay to move that on to the legislative? All right, let's move that on. Then there is item number B, which is the elementary progress reports, and that is Ms. Pouste.
Good evening. We wanted to take this time to share with you some of the work that we did this summer, in addition to FOSS that you heard, illustrative math, and all of those other initiatives. One other thing that we did work on this summer was elementary progress reports, to take time to look at our current progress report, to research other progress reports across other districts, to look at our standards, and to really dig deep into what we want to see to make sure that our progress reports are communicating what we want them to our parents, to our teachers, and to our students. So we're going to take you through that. First, I want to start off with a huge thank you to our committee members. We had representatives from every grade level. We had representatives from our Encore classes as well, our instructional coaches, and they were instrumental in working 3 full days this summer on progress reports. And it was a lot of work that we did over the course of three days. But you can see here representatives from every single grade level. And I also wanted to give a huge shout out to Christian Laird, who is our new elementary assistant principal, who, when he assumed the role as assistant principal at our elementary level, he was thrown right into this with me, looking at all of our progress reports across the board from K through 5, and really helping to put together this presentation also that you see here tonight. So just to give you a little background on the work and why we did this work this summer. So last year, as we went through what's called IPD, Instructional Professional Development, that committee, it was an ask to take a look at our progress reports at the elementary level to make sure that they aligned to standards, to make sure that it really was conveying the best information to our families and that it was easily accessible to our families as well. So through that request, we decided to form the summer committee to take some time to research, to discuss, and to really develop the best progress report for elementary that we could put forward. So why did we make this shift to progress reports? Because we really want to make clear the linkage between the standards, the assessment that we're doing in our classroom, how we're grading our students, and how that information is then reported to our families. That work is so important, and to make sure that all stakeholders have an understanding of how their students or their child is being assessed in the classroom. Why is it beneficial for Upper Dublin? Well, it's purposeful, it's practical, and it has meaningful progressions. One of the things that we did after we went through the progress reports is really making sure that we set out all of the drafts to look at them from K through 5, to make sure that that progression was meaningful, that we didn't miss certain things from a first grade progress report to a second grade and so forth and so on. So we really were making sure that not only were we addressing the standards, but there was that vertical alignment too, that we weren't missing things that needed to be in those communication documents. We felt that it is an easier and more accessible document to our stakeholders, and that we really feel it addresses the scope of skills and the standards that are set forth by the state of Pennsylvania. So the purpose of the progress report, like we had said, is really to provide a clear picture of student learning over the course of a school year, over the course of 3 trimesters, to really be able to identify what are the strengths of the student, and maybe what are those areas that we need to push a little bit more, what are those areas of growth. So I'm going to highlight over the next couple slides some key features that will look different. So currently, you can find drafts of our current progress report under the Teaching and Learning webpage on our website, but we're going to show you tonight some of those changes that have occurred to those progress reports. We did make some changes to academics performance level for qualities of a learner, which is identified on the progress report, and also the academic performance level for standards. In our previous progress report, we had one set of indicators, and those indicators were for both the qualities of a learner and for academic standards. With this progress report, we separated the two. So there's different indicators for qualities of a learner, and there's different indicators for the success standards for standards. So in our previous progress report, we had 3 letters. We had an I for independent, we had an S for if a student needed some support, and we had an NY for if the student not yet met that standard or quality of a learner. We wanted to go back and look at that to make sure that what we were communicating to parents was clear, that it was more in depth, and more specific to all of our stakeholders. One of the other areas that we identified on the progress report that will look different is there's a section that identifies if a student is receiving some additional support, like reading support from a reading specialist. That's indicated on the progress report as well. If you are in a Title I math support at Thomas Fitz, that's also indicated on the progress report. And then finally, we really wanted to make sure that our standards were aligned to the PA standards, that across the board, we were making sure we weren't missing any of our standards, and it was clearly communicating what our students were learning in our classrooms to our families. So this is the first change that you will see on the new progress report, and this is for qualities of a learner. So some of the qualities of a learner that you see are following directions, following classroom routines, maintaining focus, self-control, organization of materials, and there's a few other ones listed as well. We have the same qualities of a learner across K through 5th, so those don't change. But what you will see is that we are using the letters C, O, and R, so consistently meeting that quality of a learner, occasionally, and then rarely. And then you can see the description that's listed above. When we look at the academic performance, so we're looking at our standards in the areas of reading, math, science, social studies, and our elective areas like music, PE, art, library. These are the scales that we are going to use, and it's a 4-3-2-1, so it is different than the I, S, and Y that we used. But we took a great deal of time to investigate other schools, what they were using as far as their indicators, and what we felt really communicated to our families where their child was at that moment of time. So in the first trimester, when we're giving our progress reports, where do they fall with these specific standards in these different areas? So 4 is meeting, 3 is approaching, 2 is developing, and 1 is emerging. And then you can read the very, very specific description that's underneath every single one of those categories. So looking ahead, we are not done with our progress report committee. We have drafted our progress reports. We have shared those progress reports with our staff during our professional development days last week. We are also continuing the work that we are going to do by continuing to work to have meetings with our progress report committee, to continue to do professional development, and to also make guiding documents that will help our teachers as they're assessing their students. The one thing that is, is really important to us when we're thinking about these progress reports is that because we are aligned to the standards on the progress report, no matter what resource we have or what resources we bring in, the progress report doesn't change, because we are responsible for teaching those standards, and those standards will remain consistent unless there's a change from the state in terms of what those standards look like. So there's a lot of work that we still want to do. What we have asked our curriculum leaders and also our grade level meetings is to put an agenda item every single month onto their curriculum leader document and also to their grade level, where they're talking about the progress report. What do they see as the strengths? What are the areas that they maybe need to focus in on, and what kind of support do they continue to need? So we will do a survey at the end of every trimester for this first rollout, just to make sure that we're hitting those different marks and that we're supporting our teachers and our families the best way that we can.
All right, thank you for this presentation. Any questions, comments from the committee? Mr. Held?
So, Ms. Pustet, thank you for this. It's really excellent work. And as someone who will be on the receiving end of these, I appreciate it as well. I did have 2 questions, maybe 3, we'll find out. You talked a little bit about sort of next steps. Is there a sense of timing for when these might be rolled out to parents? And then I guess sort of add on to that question, are we also sharing these with parents to get their feedback?
Yes, so yes to all. So we are, so I'm going to be working with Stephanie Yoder, our Director of Communications, in terms of what that rollout of communication looks like. However, at our back to school nights, our instructional coaches will be present at all of our back to school nights, and they will have samples of the drafts of these progress reports. There will also be a QR code on each of those progress reports so that parents can provide feedback as well on that. Absolutely.
That's really helpful, thank you. The other question, and I'm getting a little bit weedy for just a moment, under the definitions for academic performance, the words there I think are really helpful. So meeting, approaching, developing, emerging, there's a sort of like, it connotates some sort of progress or moving towards something. I was curious about the word emerging, because then you read the definition, understands limited understanding of grade level standard, and you might tell me it doesn't matter all that much because the intervention wouldn't differ all that much. But the word emerging, if I just kind of looked at that, as a parent, might that connotate some progress that I might get a false sense of security from, that there is progress being made, or does it not really matter because the intervention is sort of the same regardless? I was just curious if you guys talked about the word emerging.
We did. We had many conversations about these words and going back and forth about like what is the best word that conveys that, and we felt like emerging was that there is an understanding of that standard in particular, but there's a limited understanding. There's a very, I would say, a very superficial, not digging deep into that. And I think through our parent-teacher conferences, that's where we have more of that conversation about what does my student look like if they have an emerging as an indicator on their progress report, and how do we help to then push them forward to get to developing really where we want them to be is meeting. And so you're right, I do think the interventions will look different for different students depending on the specific skill and the specific standard too. So I think that's where the parent-teacher conferences, those meetings, and that communication with the teacher is vital to really help to dig a little bit deeper into that.
That's helpful. I do like there's some sort of positivity to the word as well. And, if you read the description, at this stage, the student requires significant support. That's in there. And so I think as a parent, I'd read that and I'd understand what that meant. Yeah, great. Thank you.
I think some of it's rooted in growth mindset as well. We're all emerging when we learn something new, and so it honors that process as well.
And just to piggyback off of that, that was the longest part of our committee work, was the wording of that and really trying to make sure that the wording was clear, that it was clear to everyone, but also had a positive growth mindset kind of connotation to it.
I really appreciate that. And I think that's a really good approach. As a parent, that would give me some comfort as well as an understanding what are my next steps moving forward.
And to the question about the timeline, can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yep. So we have, during our professional development days, we presented to all teachers. So the committee actually presented to each of their grade levels to share the changes and things that have occurred with the progress report committee and what changes occurred to their individual progress report for their grade level. The next step is for back to school night, for us to have drafts at all of our back to school nights so that our parents can have the opportunity to look through that and to provide feedback. My next step is also to connect with Mrs. Yoder to make sure that we're communicating out to the community, not just back to school night, but what else our communication will look like to the community about the progress reports. And then we will also be presenting to our instructional professional development committee this month, at the end of the month, to make sure to get their feedback on progress reports. And then the goal would be that these would go into effect in December, which would be our first trimester, end of our first trimester.
And Ms. Evans. Oh,
Sorry. So my first comment is a bit of a superficial one, but this is the first time I think I'm seeing this new graphic for Upper Dublin Elementary Schools. It's really cute, just side note. More substantively though, the question I had was, how do we make sure that teachers are applying this rubric consistently, right? Because, not that students and parents are comparing, progress reports to each other, but I'm more concerned, you're trucking along in one kind of grade level, then you move to the next, that teacher has a very different standard. I've frankly experienced that myself with, one of my children. So I think consistency among teachers and how they're applying is clearly important. I just candidly don't know how we ensure that.
So that's a Great question. So I just want to shout out to Christian Laird, who made the graphics. So I cannot take any credit for that whatsoever. He did an amazing job. That is something that came up through the Progress Report Committee work. And the one way that we're starting to get at that and starting to address that is really having some committee meetings throughout the year to really come up with the guidelines of what are those assessments that we're using to assess for these specific standards. So there is consistency among our teachers, among the grade level, and then across buildings as well. In addition to that, the importance of having the conversation every month with the departments and with our curriculum leaders to ensure that consistency. So it's going to be a work in progress in terms of making sure that we are consistent, but that work we will continue to do. And we do think that the guiding documents that we are working on and creating will help us to have that consistency across our grade levels.
Dr. Thomas?
Just more of a comment. With the behavioral scale, it seems like that jumps up pretty quick, and like in that middle area, maybe there's room for like another category, like often and then seldom and then rarely, just so that you could show that progress, like with that growth mindset that you're speaking about.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. We'll make note.
Yeah, and as you are tying this to standards, these are all the states, I mean, you're using state standards, you said. Are there also any local standards that we're looking at, or is it specific to the state standards?
So they are really specific to our state standards. One of the things that we did add into the progress report that you would see in the draft is those standards of mathematical practice, which fits into our student-centered learning, but they are the standards of mathematical practice from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. But really standards-based, we really wanted to make sure that we were aligning it to those so that they don't change as things change, you know, in our resources.
And in a way, that also addresses to an extent the consistency between teachers and grade levels if those standards are well understood. Yeah, so this looks definitely like a really nice step forward and in line with the district plan. So thank you for doing this. Any other comments? Well, thank you. And, actually one question. Is there a need for board approval for the final version of this?
We do not believe so.
I didn't think so either, but I just wanted to verify.
It is policy, I just set it up here, policy 212 on reporting student progress. There's an AR and the policy, and it basically indicates that superintendent or designee, and it does not require approval, but we're just required to have staff input.
Well, and you go above and beyond by getting parents and stakeholder input as well. So, all right, excellent. Then the next item is our English language arts pilot, and Mrs. Drennan is up for
So
that.
last year, you may recall that we conducted a needs assessment as a large K through 12 English language arts department. And part of the recommendations that came out of that was to look at new resources. There were a number of things that we felt a new resource could provide us in terms of instructional materials and the anticipated outcome it would have for students. So as per the board policy 105, the AR states that we need your approval to conduct a pilot. So this evening, we're asking to move that to legislation, the legislative meeting, so that we can have your approval to then proceed with a materials pilot. We are anticipating that at K-5 and likely at 6-8. We are also reviewing 9 through 12, but it may not have a need for a full resource. So we will be seeking your approval of that, and there is a materials selection timeline in there, just so you sort of know what we anticipate the pilot to occur in the second and third trimester or the second and third marking periods, and that the recommendation would be made at the May board meeting. We would talk about it at the Ed Committee meeting as to what we are recommending be adopted and why.
Right, so this is not, at this point, we're just, or the request is for the pilot to be okayed by the board, whatever, even though we don't know that specifically what the pilot materials are.
Yeah,
Right?
we're still in the process of identifying what the pilot materials will be, but we need permission to do that as well, so.
Questions from the committee? Are we okay then to move this on to legislative? Oh, Dr. Thomas has a question.
So do you have some ideas about what you might like to pilot, like 3 different resources or, you know?
So we started with reviewing ed reports as well as the Reading League recommendations based on research of highly effective programs. We did a cursory review of that. The next step would be to identify hopefully two products to pilot. The idea being then we can triangulate the data between 2 new products and then what we are currently using and see what it looks like for the learner, what it looks like for the instructors across 3 different examples.
So is that presented to students or like two different groups of students, or is it just kind of reviewed by the
Students would
teachers?
interact with the pilot materials and then be assessed based on their utilization and what they learned from those pilot materials.
And is that in lieu of what we currently use, or?
In place of, yeah,
Okay.
for that amount of time of instruction. Yep.
All right, seeing no, Mr. Sirota.
Not specific to this topic, but I just want to say I really appreciate the tie to policy for both this topic and the previous topic, and that it was illustrated that this is how policy drives the way that we are conducting business. And I think that should be a practice we do more often. So that was, I think it's very helpful.
Thank you for that. It was in my notes as well, but as the policy wonk, I appreciate you bringing it up, so thank you. Mr. Wallach has an addition.
Just to echo what Mark said, the provision's actually in an AR, though, so I'm wondering if at a future policy committee meeting, we should think about whether, if this does have to come to us for sort of a pre-authorization, should that be more in a policy than an AR? Not a discussion for tonight, but just something that maybe we should think about for a future policy meeting. I also question whether this pre-sort of approval is really necessary. So maybe that's something to discuss, because I mean, to me, if the administration, the superintendent decide we want to explore a pilot, that exploration to me is not something we necessarily have to approve unless it's something that's required by school code or whatever. But these are all things for another day. I'm perfectly fine with everything we talked about.
Yeah, and I think part of that is also coming out of our change in schedule where we had monthly education meetings as instead of every other month. But yeah, your point is well taken. Yeah.
To interrupt everybody getting really excited about policy, getting back to education. It gives me great comfort, and I hope it does folks in the community too, that we're really following evidence-based best practices. So it was evident in the progress report, separating out behavior from mastery of standards, I think is essential for parents to understand and for students to get that feedback. And similarly, just with the intentionality and the thoughtfulness around paying attention to what does the research say. Thank you.
All right, so we do move this to the legislative, right? Okay, thank you for that. And that gets us then to the public participation. Speakers are required to state their name and their city of residence or affirm that they are a resident or a taxpayer before addressing the board. I'm not seeing anybody approach the podium, so, and we did not receive any input online, so I will close the public participation. Are there any other comments to make? I see shaking of heads of no. So that means then that I can announce the next Education Committee meeting, which will be on November the 5th here in the Cardinal Room at 6 p.m. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your attention and have a fantastic school year.